episode 5 of the Grind Path to Pro podcast. Thank you everybody for joining us once again. I have a awesome lineup of guests for you, and yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty good one. Bearing in mind this is going to be our last one for this year. The date for the next one will be revealed very soon on our social media, so keep your eyes open. And without further ado, I'm going to do my usual who are you and why should we care. So let's start with you, Avast. Who are you? Why do we care?
I am a shoutcaster, as specified on the tweet. I have a squeaky chair, so that's why you should listen to me. But no, I am the current one of the casting duos for North American Contenders. Previously, player / AK did not play for Boston Uprising, and then longtime professional player, and ex-vice president of gaming. And yeah, that's about it. There we go.
Your squeaky chair sounds very authoritative. Thank you.
I know.
Fusions, for the very few people who don't know, who are you and why do we care?
I'm Fusions from Team UK, which is where most people know me, but obviously I'm now on the Boston Uprising, two-way contracted with the Academy as well. I also have a very squeaky chair. I don't know if you can hear.
Not even close, buddy. Not even close to my chair.
It's
not
locked,
even
hang on.
close.
It's locked right now, so it doesn't go all the way out, but it's not squeaky. It's not as
Yeah,
squeaky.
you just try to get in on the fucking squeakiness.
It's kind of squeaky.
You tried. It's a valiant effort. And finally, Noukky, who are you and why do we care?
I am the team manager for British Hurricane, the academy team of London Spitfire in European Contenders. Also, I'm very hurt that Fusions didn't mention us at all in this introduction. And I have to say, to stick with the theme, I don't have a squeaky chair, I'm sorry.
I don't have one either, so it's okay.
Technically, no one else has a squeaky chair other than me. I am the only one with a squeaky chair.
Mine is
grab
a scuffed squeaky chair. It's a bit scuffed.
Much like your camera.
Yeah, true. I'm in a basement.
Yeah, Fusions has been kidnapped and is being allowed to stream from some guy's basement. I don't know. Really generous guy. All right. So before we get into the topics, I just want to remind everybody that at the end of the session or at the end of the episode, if there is enough time, we will have a short Q&A. So please post those questions. Our producer, I forgot to tell him this, but now he'll know, will be watching the chat and keeping track of any questions that get asked. So if there is time, I will ask them. You can direct them at one guest, multiple guests, everybody, me, hint, whoever you like. All right, let's jump straight in. I'm going to start with you, Fusion. So the first thing I think everybody wants to know, with you being somebody that kind of broke out from, well, if you don't watch Contenders, then pretty much from out of nowhere. What is your past gaming experience? How did you get into Overwatch?
Honestly, before Overwatch was a thing, like I think when Overwatch came out, I was probably like 17, so I didn't really have any like professional experience in other games before this. I was kind of just casually playing like all the competitive games that everyone else kind of plays. You know, like I played a lot of League, I played a lot of CS, but I didn't really go pro or even close to semi-pro in any of those games. Overwatch was kind of the first game that I like really pursued, like as a actual career, like professional career.
Okay. And so how, obviously the overarching theme of our podcast is the path to pro. So where did your path start? I mean, did you just get picked up by Hurricanes? Was there like a little bit of entryway into that? Did you do some open division? How did you start on your journey?
For me, since I was kind of involved in Overwatch since the beginning of the game, excluding like the beta, I was kind of around in like the tier 3 EU scene for a very, very long time before Hurricane, before Noukky actually decided to give me a tryout for Hurricane. So this was before Open Div, so I didn't play in any like Open Division or anything. But I was around in the scene for a very long time before Hurricane, which is where I kind of made my entrance into the scene for Contenders.
Nice. And with World Cup, were there tryouts for UK, or did somebody call you up and say, "Yo, we saw you in Contenders, you're our guy"?
Yeah, we did tryouts for the 12-man roster in the beginning, and then obviously they chose the 7-man roster from those tryouts as well. After I was on the 12-man roster, so after Chris stepped down from the 7-man to be a coach, they automatically brought me up because I was on the 12-man as the other main tank.
Wow, that's actually pretty lucky for you anyway. And that being said, I mean, there's a lot of tight competition, not only in Overwatch League, but in your own team as well. And obviously, we all know you to be a fantastic main tank. You started out this season ranked #1 as soon as you got your 50 games. I was there
Yeah.
for that. And I mean, we can see you are a fantastic tank. But do you see yourself being able to take a starting lineup position when you're up against players like Gamsu on Boston Uprising?
I mean, it's obviously going to be hard, right? Like both, not only Gamsu but also Axiom on top. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
they're both incredibly good tank players, so it's going to be very difficult. I mean, for now, I'm just focusing on improving like myself as much as I can while I'm playing with the academy, because obviously I'm two-way contracted as well. So I'm just gonna keep working on improving as hard as I can and just see where things go from there, pretty much.
Cool. And we're just going to round up your interview because obviously we just do like a few minutes short interview so we can get into the meat of the topic. So last couple questions here. Do you have, well, I say couple, one question really. Do you have advice for aspiring players in terms of like what small changes can an average player make that can improve their game, especially obviously in main tank situations?
Mm, I like in-game advice is kind of hard to give to people kind of aspiring, right? Like the biggest thing that helped me actually was like out of game stuff. So like
Mhm.
just grinding the game a consistent amount. Even as a tank player, it's important to just practice. So like just playing the game a lot and also just having a relatively healthy lifestyle outside of just scrims and stuff is really important as well. Because obviously you want to be playing your best when you're actually practicing. That helped me a lot as a player.
I'm actually really happy to hear that. A lot of players will say to you, no, you got to grind, you got to keep going 18 hours a day, really put in that effort. So I'm really impressed to hear that there is a player out there that's saying, guys, you got to look after yourselves first and the rest will follow. Obviously, you need to put the work in, but
Yeah.
you can't play at your best if you're not at your best. Does that make sense?
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. Let's move on to Avast. So you have a pretty interesting history in the gaming scene. I know that you used to play Team Fortress 2. You also became an Overwatch player. Can you give us like a more broad outline, or rather a bigger outline of what your past gaming experience has been? Was it just TF2 and Overwatch, or has there been more to it?
I think it's just it's pretty much just TF2. Beforehand, what I played, because TF2 has a very small but dedicated scene. They run through the league that most of like CS:GO for North America at least goes through, which is ESEA. So they have ESEA divisions like Open, Intermediate, Premier, blah blah blah. So I played TF2 for like 4 years, I want to say, on and off, and then so I sort of had a similar arc as well, where like I won Intermediate, played a season of Premier, casted for like a season, quit the game. Then I played Overwatch since launch. Yeah, since launch with a very not well-known team called I'm Your Huckleberry in 2016, which had where I discovered Note, by the way. I discovered Note. I've brought this up so many times now, but Huck has still not paid me his finder's fee for Note. I found him in a rank game. And we played with him, and then afterwards I joined Bird Noises because Verbo got poached by Immortals at the time, and well, it's not poaching, I guess. It's not poaching since we've had this clarification since he's
No,
not under
don't start that
contract.
now.
He's not under contract. but he went to Immortals, and then I went and played with Bird Noises where we became Hammers, then we became LGE, flamed out of Contenders Season 0 playoffs, and then eventually went to Boston. Yeah, and now here I am.
Jeez. And how does TF2 stack up to Overwatch? I mean, look, I've never played the game, but I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, you suck at Overwatch. Go back to TF2." So, like, how does it
They
actually
said that.
stack up?
They said that to you personally?
No,
Or they
no, no,
said
no, no, no,
heard
not to
people
me.
say that? Who says that?
I've
Who has
heard
ever
that.
said? I don't even.
Okay. You know that TikTok, I'm already Tracer. There's a line in the
Oh, I
song that says,
love
"Go
that
back to
TikTok.
TF2." I
That and
love
Hit
the
or Miss
song.
are two of my favorite TikToks. But I would say it stacks up very differently. I mean, they're like the concept is like vaguely similar, where it's like a class-based shooter, but it's much more Quake-like than it is MOBA-like. So there's a lot more. It's much more movement-based and mechanically based, and like projectile-oriented based than Overwatch. So I would say that especially in a very role-dependent game like Overwatch, it's much more. You feel much more in control of your own destiny. which is, and you have a lot more ability to show off like classical FPS like mechanics and like movement abilities.
Mm.
The problem is the game was just like dead from the start because Valve was like,
Yikes.
you are a hat simulator, like this is where we're gonna get all of our money from, and we're gonna just like, I mean, they literally put on like the ex-Greek finance minister to like run the economy for like TF2 or something. I can't remember if that was exactly what it was, but some position involved. So that it's a great game, but it wasn't ever going to be supported in the same way, and it's very different in terms of how it operates because it's more Quake-like than it is MOBA. So.
And you mentioned that you obviously now played that, and then you mentioned you casted it, and that was something that I found in quite an old interview you did with Volumel, where you said that you were a player, then you were a caster, then you were an Overwatch player, then you were a caster again. Like, what would
Yes.
you say your ultimate goal is in esports? Because again, going back to that interview, you were saying, you want to be a player, but casting is cool, and I'm just curious, like, what is your greatest end vision for yourself?
I think the end goal is always to just stay in esports, which is a task in and of itself. Like, if you actually want to make a career, it's not just like, it's not even a question of like, are you good enough to be in esports? There are plenty of people that are great, that have been great throughout time that you don't even hear about anymore because they're just done. And it's not about being good. It's about how do you stay continually relevant and move from title to title, because it's not until really recently, and even then it's still to be determined if any game will have the longevity of like a traditional sport. So you have to make adjustments both to yourself and like learn new games, but also have skill sets that are like more overarching. And that's why like I've always found like for TF2 I was like, well, there wasn't really a reason for me to invest the time because I was in school and playing and I wasn't making any money, so I'm like, well, I'll just cast for seasons because it's a lot chiller, and then I'm done. And now it was the same way in Overwatch when I first started playing with like LG. Like Jake and I were both in school and college and like, or university if we want to go more EU. But we were both in uni and like playing at the same time, so it was tough to juggle. And it's the same thing as like, do you have to have an overarching skill set you can translate to game, so you can maybe be a player, learn the game, then transition to like a talent role, or even just become a talent role now and like move to. That's the thing, is like I just want to be sustainable. I do love Overwatch and I like the community, I like the concept, and I want it to be a game that lasts for a very long time, especially with this franchise system and the amount of investment that's been put into it, to where it can't just fold in on itself, because like there's so many people with money that like they'll be very angry if the league were to suddenly collapse. They can't pull an H1Z1 Pro League and just disappear, poof from existence. So I think that's where the end goal really is making sure to stay in esports, and hopefully Overwatch is like that goal is the one to make it that. So.
And do you ever see yourself possibly playing again, either Overwatch or another game?
I think for Overwatch it's tough. It is tough. Now I have seen miraculous things happen. There are people I wouldn't even expect that were to be playing anymore that just have magically reappeared. Like one of those examples would be like Hui on first gen. I thought he was. I haven't seen that name in ages, literally ages, and now he's like back, like on a pretty decently performing team with first gen. So it's not that it's out of the question, but Overwatch is in a unique state where it really needs player perspective, like ex-professional, especially ex-Overwatch League perspective, really badly. I think on the talent side, and it's not that the talent isn't capable or they're not, I guess to be more redundant, talented. They're really good, especially when it comes to the technical aspects of casting. A lot of them have been high-level casters in other games. It's just Overwatch is like a unique beast, and it's been a very fast transition and a lot of the talent that have entered haven't necessarily had a lot of exposure to it before. They're just like thrown into Overwatch League and like go. And because of like the ecosystem like vacuum that existed for a little bit in Overwatch, there hasn't been a lot of development in that particular side, and also like staff side. So I think that is, for me, probably moving forward, I'm much more focused on being talent, because I think it's something Overwatch needs. It's what Blizzard has sort of communicated me through some of their meetings that I've had with them, that like they really want from me in particular, and from other players that are looking to make a swap. So probably sticking with the talent role for now.
Nice. Well, I think your on-air fans will be pretty happy to hear that. There's a lot of people that have been saying a lot of good things about your casting, so I think everybody would be
You're
pretty
gonna make
chuffed
me
for
blush.
that.
I'm very
Aw.
pale, so I'll just turn red. So be careful.
Tomato boy. Um, last little thing here, and it's gonna be similar to, it's basically the same as Fusion's last question. Do you have any advice for aspiring on-air talent?
Mm. Well, I think it's like two pieces of advice. One of them was, which is what I'm guilty of, which is the filler words.
Yeah.
And because when you're nervous on cast, I had like a very notable moment, I think my first week, where I was pulling out the absolutely's like 300 times once on a cast because I was afraid I didn't know how to handle the transitions. And ZP is like really, really good at like we saw him work previously with Jake, and like he's been a veteran cast for a long time. He's really, really good at trying to handle people that have had higher game knowledge experience and are like new to casting. So it was just me being nervous on cast, and now I've eliminated it. But like filler words like that, filler words like filler words like, and now it's not as bad. But like on the side of is a really common caster thing to like throw out like a ton. So filler word, and that's just like a lot of it comes down to being nervous and just getting more time in front of the camera. So you just need to, but you have to mentally focus on like, I will not say this word. I will not use this phrase. I will take a break. I will pause to not say it. And then two, which is tough, I think, for talent in particular, since it's a very different path than was normally walked. But game knowledge is like key in Overwatch. I know Monty has made the excuse like you can be like bronze and have the same level of casting talent as someone that was GM plus. And I think on a technical level, he's right. There are technical skills to speaking and being an orator that are like, will obviously set you apart from someone that's not a good speaker, not a good presenter. But it's really tough to elucidate and talk about the inner workings of a game as fast paced as Overwatch, especially even when we're meta like this, where everything is on a microplay with goats, for contenders at least. And so you should do your best as well to try to play the game as much as possible and learn it to your best ability. Watch as many pro players like perspectives and VOD reviews as they can, because you can't necessarily, especially if you're trying to from the get-go become a full talent, you can't commit to being a professional player at the same time, right? It's tough to put in hours, the same amount of hours to play and learn the game as it is to learn how to cast the game. But you have to try to find a balance, because it is the one area, and it's why Blizz has been pushing so hard for certain players, ex-Overwatch League players, to make a swap, is because they need that perspective, they need that high-level game knowledge in the talent. And that's why I think something a lot of talent should be pushing to do is not just worrying about their technical speaking abilities, but their actual game knowledge.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. Even at Broadcast.gg, it's really important for us when we go into a cast to make sure that we know what we're talking about. The last thing you want to do is wind up on a cast and say something, and the entire spectator log are just going, "Huh?" You're not going to get too far. I mean, you can like BS your way through a lot of it, but when you get to the higher levels, it's definitely not ideal. Okay. Let's move along to Noukky. And you are actually the one that I was most excited to talk to. Sorry, boys. You are formerly a pro Heroes of the Storm player, formerly a pro Overwatch support player, now managing British Hurricanes. And you've been super involved with tournaments and the community, with be it organizing, participating. Like, you are really, really involved. And I wanted to ask, first and foremost, why the swap from player to manager?
First of all, we need to address I wasn't a pro in Heroes of the Storm. It was more of a semi-pro kind of thing where you're not really like under contract and stuff, because that's a bit too far for my skill set. And it's dead, so it's very, very sad. Anyways, no, the transition from player to manager was more of a personal thing of mine. I had the feeling that I could progress more in a role outside of the game than I would in a role inside the game, because I always was more of a shot caller role anyways, and I think I could transition that game knowledge better in a more outside role, like helping other people, than I could in mechanical skill myself.
Makes a lot of sense. And just over a year ago, you wrote a blog post called The Path to Pro, which I thought was really cool. And you spoke about the professional competitive Overwatch environment and the road players need to walk to get their pro status. Have any of your ideas kind of changed since then, or are you still on the same wavelength, more or less?
I'm basically on the same wavelength. I think grassroots are still like super important. I think that starting out more or less slowly is still important because you have to get used to tournament play first, and you have to get your nerves in check, and you have to get your, oh my god, I need to perform in front of a stream correctly before you can actually like move on into a better team environment. I think the path to pro is necessary for many people. Of course, there's like people that don't need it necessarily, or like that have like natural talent that lets them skip a step. But I think in terms of how to prepare yourself to play on stage one day, it's definitely needed, yes.
And you define tier 2 as the point of self-sustainability. Do you believe that that's where Overwatch tier 2 is now at the moment?
No, not at all. I don't think there is enough support for that. Not only on Blizzard's side, but in general. Like there is not enough incentives for orgs to get invested into it. There is not enough incentives for sponsors to get invested into it. Like the whole sponsor policy is sometimes very, very vague and very I'm missing the English word, but it's not really very clear what sponsors get from investing into Overwatch, and so it's very shaky at the moment when it comes to self-sustainability.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think also, yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's difficult for players to find a place for themselves in tier 2, and not just players, managers and coaches as well. They put a lot of time into their teams, and the reward isn't quite enough yet. So I can pretty much agree with what you're saying.
The reward system is pretty relative. Like for many people, like for me personally, it's a reward if I see my players progress, but it's definitely necessary if you want people to flourish your scene and to develop talent and to put their time into it, that they need some kind of sustainability to do that.
Well, I mean, you're the Overwatch mom. So, of course, for you, it's all about your players. And that being said, a lot of your players have recently gone on to play not only in the World Cup, Fusions, but soon Overwatch League as well, Fusions. As the mother of Western Overwatch, in inverted commas, how do you feel about all of your little baby chickens finally flying?
It's I'm looking
Chickens
at it
don't
with
fly.
Ah, come on,
To
Avast.
put that out there, chickens don't fly.
we can
So,
let chickens flap.
Not a good metaphor. There, they will crash to the ground. But
Okay,
continue.
maybe
I
they're
wouldn't
that
say
good.
they're
Maybe they're
crashing.
good if they fly.
They're more or less flapping, but that's it, I think.
I now have visions.
I'm really proud of all of them. I've seen people like Fusions, for example. Like he's just here, and I've known him for 2 years, 3 years almost now, and I've seen him go from playing in my tournaments that I organized in 2017, beginning of 2017, to being in Overwatch League now. That's like, it makes me so proud. And especially like Kip, which I knew from beta, which I played in my first team with. He
Wow.
goes to Overwatch League. And it's just I don't know how to describe it. It's just a very satisfying feeling to know that you helped people achieve this.
Well, earlier you mentioned that you have some fun stories about fusions. If you happen to think of
God.
one off the top of your head, we'd be happy to.
I think Boston will not necessarily make this experience, but I think Fusions is a very vocal person when it comes to how hot it is in his room. And since and since Boston is more like a chilled place and there's ACs there, they will probably never experience it. But in summer, it's like it's been dropped every half an hour or so how hot it is in his room.
I have a very small room, and during summer,
Big dog.
it was about 35 degrees in my room. So during Contender Season 2, I was very vocal about it being extremely hot in my room all the time, 24/7. And my team at the time, so Hurricane obviously, like to meme me for it, and also told me it was my catchphrase. So it's
Nice.
one that's stuck with me, I guess.
Well, anyone that's watched your stream already knows how vocal you are. I cannot imagine that like added on to that. It's so hot.
Well, it's unlikely that you're gonna have to deal with the heat or the cold of Boston, right? Since you're gonna be
Yeah,
playing
that's
from
true,
the UK for the majority of contenders, correct?
Yeah, for contenders, yeah.
Because I had that conversation with Huck, where both you and Klaus more than likely will be staying in your
I
own
think
region for at least contenders.
Klaus will actually be moving out soon. Definitely
Really?
before playoffs. I think he should be
Wow.
there before the next game, actually, before our first Shade game. So I think Klaus is going to be there very soon after Christmas. I, however, will be a lot longer. So I'm not because obviously there's complications with US visa and the team house is in Canada for the academy team as well. So I would have to get 2 separate visas. So it's very complicated. But
Wow.
I won't be there anytime soon. But Klaus will, fortunately.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. So how is 110 ping? Smile.
Well, 110, like I get like 115 on East, which is okay. Like East is pretty manageable, honestly. It's like when you're below like the 150 mark, I actually feel like pretty confident. Like I've adapted pretty well. Like I'm pretty comfortable playing on that ping now. But you can kind of see like last week on Hollywood, which was on West Coast, because Mayhem picked it for their second, and like this week on Hanamura, for example, which is West Coast, you can see when I'm getting that like 180 ms, it becomes a lot more shaky. Like it's kind of hard to play in this meta as a Ryan and Goats when you like the second your bubble goes down and you get run into by a Brig shield bash, there's like even delay on the shield, so you're taking like an extra 100 damage just because you can't put up your shield in time with the ping disadvantage. So it's kind of unfortunate, but East Coast is honestly not that bad. West Coast is kind of unfortunate, but it's whatever. I can deal with it.
By the way.
No server select.
No server select, by the way. Scott Mercer, we had this conversation during Overwatch League. I had it with you face to face. Look me in the eyes, Scott Mercer. Look me in the eyes and tell me why there's no server select.
Okay then. Yeah, I always come to the ping question because obviously being a South African player, we live on 150 to 220. So whenever I hear of one of the pro players saying, "Oh, I have to play on 70 ping, Lord," and I just gotta smile. All right. There was just one last question for Noukky. I don't know if you caught our episode where we had Numlocked, but he was here and he told his story and like everyone wanted to start crying. So we have to know, how is he doing? How is our boy?
He's doing pretty well, honestly. He filled Fusion's shoes in terms of communication for the team, and because and in terms of leadership in game, very very well. He's a very seasoned player, and he helps our more new guys like Yofi and Danit a lot, I think.
Nice. Well,
He
I
was a
think we're
good
all very
rescue.
happy.
A good rescue from the Valiant bench there for you to
Yeah,
replace your Brit-shaped hole.
Numlock was like, I was
the crowd British player in the team.
Yeah,
We're
I
the
was like
British Hurricane
really
after all.
pleasantly surprised by Numlock. Like when because obviously I already knew that I was leaving for
Mhm.
Boston, so I was helping like just watch over their scrims and like try and help them like pick out the main tank. And obviously, no, like it's a bad look when you're permabenched in Owl and then you get dropped. But like, cause it's like a bad look for you. Avast looking at the camera. No, but seriously. But then we try. Obviously, I watched Numlock play like, and I was like super impressed. Like he was obviously very overshadowed by. I mean, he had to compete with Fate on Valiant, which is really difficult to do. But like he's actually he's a very talented player for sure.
Nice.
He's super strong. He's unfortunate what happens there, and it's not always the player's fault in Overwatch League either when they're like benched totally. Also, I mean, I'll go ahead and say it. Valiant in early stage 1 and 2 was a dumpster fire of an organization, in my opinion. They had a lot of problems within the team. So
that's a hot take.
that is a hot take. I mean, it's hot like a dumpster fire. So they had a lot of problems, and so it's not always the player's fault for being in that scenario. Now, granted, Fate is like honestly, in my opinion, like a top 3 main tank in Overwatch League. So
Yeah,
it's
sure.
tough to really compete with how strong Fate is. But a lot of times it's like you have to make a choice in like an organizational standpoint, like, and so I wouldn't necessarily say Numlock isn't capable. It was just an unfortunate scenario with how Valiant was and how good Fate is for him in particular. So
many teams were just not prepared to play. Like they had this idea in their head with, oh, we have people on the bench, and we have maybe people to scrim with. We have like second teams, development teams, and they didn't really know how to execute it correctly. I think that led to so many players being like on the bench and not being really used. And then they found out maybe it's better if we have 6 and maybe 7 or maximum 8 to swap in and out depending on maps. And so many people were just left on the side of that and suffered from it.
All right. Just a quick reminder, everybody, as we move into our set topics for the evening. If you do have questions for our guests, please post them. Our producer will be looking out for them. And if we have time at the end of the episode, we will get to those. So let us get straight into our first topic of the evening. Now, I don't know if you guys saw, Taimu tweeted a little while ago about mobility in Overwatch. And it kind of got us thinking about the state of Overwatch as a game, right? Our first episode, we discussed the state of Overwatch in terms of maps and various other things. Now we want to talk about, with all of these extras, mobility, stun, CC, damage boost, it all starts to feel very MOBA. But the game is largely seen as an FPS. Is the hybrid nature of the game working? Should it be more clearly defined? Is it clearly defined? What do you guys think?
I'm gonna go. Let fusions go. Wait, or Noukky? Or Noukky going? Noukky, go.
I'm
I didn't
going
interrupt you.
in.
Go, Noukky. Go.
Yes.
Go. Going in.
I think it's leaning a tiny bit too much onto the MOBA side at the moment. I think the best game experience that the viewer can have is the mix between MOBA with the strategy and between FPS with the shooting. But I think the more exciting thing for people is actually seeing the mechanical skill level of clicking heads, as simple as it sounds. And so all this piling on to stuns and CCs and mobility abilities is kind of driving away from that, where it's more about how do you play together as a team and how do you disable the enemy team instead of how the mechanical skill ceiling is.
Yeah. I think I can agree with that myself, but I think people have some blinders on, and you can tell that Overwatch League has brought in a lot more new viewers that didn't watch the game before. Because I remember a little known composition called the Quad Tank back in the day. And I remember there were some very famous European teams along with North American teams known as Bird Noises and also the Chavs with the old sizzle nose right there.
Damn it, you don't take the Chavs away from us.
The Chavs were great.
Chavs.
Chavs were great. And everyone was like, that was when the World of Tanks meme was born.
Oh yeah.
Where everyone was like, oh, so many tanks. There's not FPS enough for me. I need constant left-clicking action. Triple DPS, please. When I will say GOATS is like different in that there is a lot more CC, but the actual it's just like a repeat of quad tanks essentially in terms of the same complaints that were had and the same meta blinders. And I don't think a lot of people understand that, like, sure, it's less FPS. I will agree with that, but the actual interplay that goes in is a lot more intense and mechanically and mentally straining than in dive. Realistically, like a well-executed dive, especially when you're playing Genji dive, which is like one of the most popular dive styles, obviously, is like probably 10 times more brain dead than tanks ever will be, because it's literally if you're really Boston had the cleanest dives of stages 1 through 3. And even after we lost, the aforementioned he who shall not be named, and it was just, here's a place, dive it. And that was it. Now, obviously, you can, like, we're going to force some cooldowns. We're going to wait for someone to use a shift. Like, there is some small, like cooldown tracking that goes down there. But at its most based form, like Genji dive, when you have, like, the incredibly clean dives, it's a setup and a dive. There is no other play that goes into place. After that, it's just shifting in and just shooting targets. That's it. So there is, sure, it looks cooler, but it's honestly like way less hard than GOATS is.
Hot take 2.0 from Avast.
I think it's all about the balance of what viewers expect from a game and what actually, like, they understand of the game. From a team perspective, it's way more interesting to play goats, and it's way more interesting to play like strategy heavy comps where you actually have to understand what they're doing and to understand the game. But I think for like the casual viewer, it's just less interesting because they don't really understand it. If you see comments on Reddit, on Twitch chat, on wherever you want to look at how they view goats and how we as a professional community view goats, it's like so vastly different.
Like the way I kind of see it is that I never really thought about it like the MOBA compared to FPS comparison. Obviously, I'm probably a little bit biased because I'm a player that likes to I really value communication and like kind of managing my team as much as I can. So I guess for me, like I kind of like the aspect of goats that is like the kind of team play and like making sure that everyone kind of runs as a unit. You know, like that we're all kind of playing on the same page. Like I kind of like that, like in its competitive nature. Goats as a comp by itself, at least on patch 1.29, which is the pre-Brig nerf and the pre-Ash release, which is what Contenders is on right now, is a little bit frustrating just because like there is like before the Brig nerfs, Brig was definitely overtuned in my opinion, and like there's obviously like those sorts of aspects as well. But like in general, that's just like that's the same in like any kind of meta. You're always gonna have your OP heroes, you know. I think for me, like what I would prefer is if like the meta wasn't as stale for so long, if that makes sense. Because right now we're kind of at a point where we'll have the same meta for almost a year at some points. Like dive is kind of a thing for like a year. You get the odd like quad tank cheese thrown in, but like in general, teams will play this one meta because it's the least counterable, right? And that's kind of what we got right now with goats. And I kind of wish there would be more alternatives to actually play, like more diversity in comps and also like heroes. But yeah, that's kind of how I see it, I guess.
Well, my rebuttal to that is you should be watching South American and Chinese contenders. The strats that we've been seeing every time I go into like an EU or an NA or a Korean contenders stream, and everyone's like, "Oh, goats, Resident Sleeper." Every time I open contenders, it's goats. And I just think you're watching the wrong contenders, man. South America, we've seen quad DPS, we've seen Pharah, we've seen Mei strats. Like the diversity is there. And there's a lot of arguments as to why that is, but I feel like it is possible, especially now with the changes that are coming. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I
Well, the
definitely
majority
think
of
it's
changes are
possible.
on contenders, right? They're not
No,
being
yeah,
patched.
No.
We're
not
gonna
yet.
go for
Yeah.
playoffs. We're gonna go on to Ash patch, not even nerf to
but
Brig
not
patch,
Brig,
Yeah.
Brig
Yeah.
nerf. Yeah.
which
So
was a mistake I made. But it's only Ash. Like so, part of it is like the contenders patching. So it's not necessarily totally
Yeah.
like no one's innovating. It's just you on contenders. It's you can't.
yeah, I mean, I think on 1.29, like there is a lack of there hasn't really been this goats. I don't know if this like culture is the right word, but there's not really been this goats culture in these a lot of the like other regions like China, for example. Like they've never really had that. Korea had some goats even in previous seasons, and North America had some goats despite not really playing it much. But like obviously a lot of people like have realized the strength of goats, and also the Team China comp that they run with the Winston instead of the Rhine as well really opens up a lot of doors in the way of stopping dive comps, stopping like stuff like flankers being effective, and it kind of obviously only having to switch one hero is like, and then basically countering the majority of your previous counters is like a really strong. It just makes it really strong. So like I feel like on 1.29 and maybe 1.30 as well with Ash, I don't think Ash changes that much. I think Goats is kind of just like the go-to because it is so strong and it's so hard to counter. And the issue is if you run a comp that's a direct counter, it's almost always going to be something that the enemy team could just switch onto something else and instantly win against it. So it just doesn't make countering Goats worth it. And you might as well just practice Goats at this point.
Speaking of experience from the European contender side, where we actually have teams like Windstrike that play Mei into goats, and that
Yeah.
and tiny bit of self-advertisement us that are playing triple DPS into it on certain points. It's just you just have to weigh in how much effort you have to put into a comp to actually not play goats against it. Since for most of the comps that you don't want to force goats versus goats, you have to play the comp really well, and you have to play around your your win conditions so well that for most of the teams, it's just way easier to go goats.
Yeah. Well, keeping this kind of in line with the state of Overwatch, and we've been talking about changes that are coming up. What have been some of the biggest changes we've seen in Overwatch over the past 3 years? The meta-defining changes, the changes to maps, changes that have really changed the game itself, not just small tweaks here or there, but really big changes that have affected the game.
The eggplant change, or more or less the one
what?
hero limit. The eggplant, the one hero limit.
Egg? Why is it
Do you
eggplant?
not remember the eggplant emote?
No.
I know what the eggplant emote is.
Yeah, like I'm with Avast on this one.
I mean, I know. I remember Zero Hero Limit. I remember the 6 Diva stalls on Hanamura. I remember that. But why is it the eggplant?
Yeah.
Why is it the eggplant though?
The not only the OW but the Overwatch community in general pushed it with the eggplant emote. It was more or less a symbol of please give us one hero limit at one point.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
but I guess that was
I do not remember this.
that was probably just around the time of like the emoji like memes and stuff, right?
I do not
Yes.
remember this. I've been playing since launch and I do not.
Ask him, Pro.
The eggplant.
Yeah,
I do. Oh, bro. Okay. Well, I mean that.
Yeah,
weird...
you're in the wrong Discord.
I don't remember that honestly, but yeah, Zero Hero.
Slasher was very fond of it. Let's say.
I mean,
that.
one hero limit was a massive change. I think honestly, like the introduction of obviously for this is more recent, but like the introduction of Brig as a hero has changed so much because obviously in the beginning people. I remember like originally all the contenders and Overwatch League teams were on a previous patch, so it was only like open division teams. And I remember talking to some of my friends in open div teams, and they were like, "Oh, Brig's really bad. You just counter her by running tanks." So people were just running tanks against Brig because it's like, oh well, you don't need to dive against her because she counters flankers, right? That's the point. But then obviously people started playing her in tanks, and it's like, well, what do you do
Now
now?
what?
Like, now what? Like, and if they played flankers, you can just run Brig McCree, you know, like. Brig is too good at everything. I think like she's like I feel like Brig has kind of been made like with her kit in a way that she's like a jack of all trades and the master of none. Obviously, she doesn't have very much mobility, which is her downside. But she's kind of like master of everything except for mobility right now. Like she does too much of everything, pretty much.
Well, we're gonna talk about changes that are big and characters that do too much of everything. First of all, we're gonna start with Zenyatta getting in an extra HP. Going from 150 HP to 200, even though he doesn't do 50% Discord Orb anymore, but Discord Orb is still the best ability behind Matrix, which brings and he has the best ultimate in the game, Trance. Yeah. And secondly, Diva. The addition of Diva, well, not just the addition of Diva, but changing her Matrix to a actual, not a cooldown, but a bar, like a resource bar, is like the biggest change that's ever made to Overwatch. Like everyone always, this is why I'm looking at you, Flex TPS players. I've already had this rant when I did a VOD review, but like I'm looking at you. You people sitting here complaining about Brig and I'm like, oh, our life is so hard. Lucio, players have had to play Lucio since launch, except for like the couple times for Mercy. And then Diva, off-tank players haven't even got to play Roadhog or Zarya in years. They've literally only played Diva, like for so long. So quit your complaining, okay? You spoiled babies. You actual spoiled babies. Because those two additions right there, disastrous. Disastrous. It is.
No, I could agree with you that Zenyatta, like I would say in terms of Zenyatta, when you couple that with Brigitte and obviously a little bit Zarya in terms of the rally and how armor stacks under shield, that is so broken in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I think it's a bit way too overtuned. I've seen a lot of people suggest the change for putting armor over shields, and I think it's just a very simple but very effective idea. Like it does indirectly make Brig a lot weaker, but like she already does a lot more than just the armor, you know? Like like the fact that a Zenyatta can sit in the backline on 400 HP literally by itself disables dive. Like as a Winston player, like I'm just thinking to my comp games where I'm like playing Winston, because obviously in scrims I'd never be like stupid enough to stay on Winston dive against Zen Brig. But like if I'm playing in a comp game as Winston against like Zen with armor on him, and like you can't set up as coordinated with that, even if you get a tracer to go with you, it's like, well, how do you kill how do you kill the Zen? And even if you get him to like even if you get rid of the armor and get him on like down 50 HP to where he can actually die, the Brig will just turn around and press E on him, and suddenly he's full HP again. So he literally can't die. Like dive is impossible to play, even without Brig stunning and one-shotting flankers.
And it mitigates Sombra as well, which is one of the
Yep.
only direct counters, like DPS counters. Like with armor underneath shields, it just means you EMP, and now you still have an extra 200 HP to go because they still have armor, and it's stronger than 200 HP because it's armor. Because armor is just straight up better, especially against like if you're playing any sort of dive composition, because Winston does like actually nothing against armor. So it's definitely a simple change that could be made that would make Brigitte like a lot less oppressive against like Sombra at least, and like running counters.
Well, that brings me on to kind of the next question in this topic. Barring Mercy and Diva, because we're going to go really deep dive into those in a minute. What are some of the changes that you guys would like to see? Maps or in terms of just general quality of life stuff for heroes? Or, I mean, one thing that was brought up again today was the idea of a soft role queue. Like, what kind of changes will you guys think might help the game a little bit better?
I don't know, Fusion, you go first. I'd have to think about it.
I'm a really big fan of like the role queue idea. I don't know, like the issue is like how you would actually make it work is very difficult. I think a more simple change that would be very just good idea is like people saying like you should have solo duo queue separate from stacking, and I definitely think that, as well as the fact that placements right now are really bad in the way that I think they place you way too high. It's like for example, last season I probably ended like 4.5, and like I go like 7 and 3 in placements, and I'm like 4,550 or close to 4.6k, which is how I ended up getting like rank 1 at the start of the season, right? As soon as ladder released. But it's like literally there's no encouragement for you to play. On my main, as soon as I got rank 1 this season, I camped it and I went and ranked up my Smurf. My Smurf has 200 plus games played on it, and my main has not even 100 games played on it this season, because there's just no reason to play when you're already at the top rank, you know, because all you're going to do is lose it. There's no reason to, no one's going to overtake you because you can just camp there and not lose it. And yeah, so that along with like solo duo queue is like the biggest change for me. And obviously a role queue is the more awkward one because it would be hard to kind of make work. Although I really would like to see some kind of role queue. Like, I don't know how you would really implement it, but just getting into games with like 4 main tanks on my team is like the most, I mean, right now in this meta, it's actually winnable if you get that kind of situation, because they just play tanks. Like they'll fill for like goats. But like in general, having people all on the same role, especially when you're trying to practice, is kind of awkward because it just kind of reduces the quality of your comm games.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that role queue is. I had a conversation with Mr. X, I believe, the other day about how, and it's because he has a little bit different perspective on like matchmaking things, because we're always looking at a very almost like a MOBA-esque role queue like all the time when we look for solutions. And he was like, well, in COD, because he was an ex-professional Call of Duty player, they had systems that incentivized using the essentially the LFG function, and that's always been the core issue. Is everyone's talked about how the Overwatch is meant to be played in like a group. Like if you were playing in a group in a stack, like a 6 stack, and have all your roles like, or just your players predetermined, then it's a lot less worrisome about who do you get from the matchmaking ladder because you're already predetermining. And so I think a big change as well is, I agree with the role queue and it's solo duo at its base, because though it is tough to implement role, because the easiest solution would be like a very soft role queue where like it's based on, you just get a 1-1, you can guarantee 1-1-1, like you have one person majority hours on support, one person majority hours on main tank, and one person majority hours on like other, and then you just build from there. But if you were to incentivize grouping by having almost like matchmaking tournaments, where the top 6 stacks or your top stacks of whatever type, like if you were at the top of the ladder or the top of the rankings for your stacks, then you can be invited to go play matchmaking tournaments, community tournaments, to go, and it incentivizes grouping, incentivizes playing in the system that Overwatch is meant. That's how Team 4 was literally like, you should play in stacks. So if you want the community to play in stacks, you can't just be like, hey, here's an LFG function, But solo queuers and everyone else, like, just you can keep doing your stuff and it's still gonna be like not that great, and you don't get anything out of LFG, and like you have LFG. So like, why not incentivize the matchmaking, which is what a lot of other games do to improve the quality of matchmaking, and it also helps increase the amount of people passing through the path to pro, because you're just creating a more direct conduit from matchmaking, open division, contenders, owl. So if you make a consistent theme of you are incentivized to stack, learn the game, play community tournaments or something else, then go to open div, then go to contenders, and so on and so forth, I think it makes a lot more sense within their own design philosophy, where, you know, we complain about like we should get this from other games, but why are we not just promoting the context, the philosophy of Team 4's idea of like, we want you to stack. So on that case, the impetus should be, there should be incentives to stack. There should be reasons to stack, and helping to even just more organically promote that path through tournaments.
I think the biggest issue will again come to implementation, right? Because you could say, for example, so if you've got like a World of Warcraft-esque thing, so you check your box, okay, I'm a healer, so I'm a support player. That can obviously be abused, because if everybody queues according to the role that they want to play, you're gonna have like 80% DPS with queue times of 40 minutes in plat, which, okay, for GM and top 500, yes, you guys are used to those queues. For us in plat, we used to like 5-minute queues max. So that would be one kind of issue with that. And then DPS players will just start to kind of abuse it. So, okay, I'm going to queue support, get into game, insta-lock Hanzo,
Well, that should be a
other-
That's
ban.
reportable then.
That should be a ban, though. If you abuse role queue, it's the same that way in League and other stuff. Yeah, everyone's like, when I see arguments like that, it sounds like you just haven't played a lot of other like games that have role queues, because when you do that in other games, you get banned. You can't
To
abuse
be fair,
role queue.
though, okay, now I have to play devil's advocate. How many times have you reported someone and gotten that, thank you, we have taken action against this person? I know people that have had the message. I have never got the message.
I mean, I've gotten the message plenty of times myself. I've definitely gotten the message. I would say it's maybe not what we like, but also it's because the whole report system in Overwatch is that it's fundamentally flawed, because you can report someone just for not playing well. You can report someone like, well, like what is the context for reporting other than like, well, he's soft throwing. What's a soft throw? Well, he's not on his
Yeah.
roll. Well, there's no roll queue. So how can you report someone for being off the roll? There's no roll queue. Like, why are you punishing them? There's no roll. There's no law in place saying you can't go off your roll. So if you want to punish people, then you have to have a system of rules in place, rather than some like nebulous, like, we will have fun but also take it seriously, like weird thing going on. Like, you have to make a stand at some point. You either incentivize the grouping, you have a roll queue system to where there are clear rules, like if you get off your roll, you will be punished. But since there's none of that in place, then obviously the reporting system has a lot less teeth in it. It's like, it's gummy. It's very old person home.
Yeah,
So, I don't know.
like I think something that has some to do with that as well. Like it's like the private profile system that they implemented, which obviously I'm very biased coming from a professional player like point of view who is trying to practice and get people on their roles in games. But it's like 90% of the time, the people in my games that have private profiles, like I'll see tank or support players or even DPS players that are well known, right? Almost all of them won't have private profiles because they don't care. But you'll see a lot of these players in games insta-locking DPS, and they'll either be a person that just locks in random heroes, or there'll be a person that plays another role that's got tilted or something and has just picked DPS, and then they just private their profile so no one can see. And 90% of the private profiles that I see are because of this. Like, and I kind of just think like it's really frustrating, because I don't want to report these people just for playing another character, because I know they're not going to get banned anyway. But I like at the same time they're kind of soft throwing my games. It's hard to be like, oh yeah, this is fine, when they're kind of just soft throwing by picking these random heroes. But there's not really anything you can do about it. Like, it's not reportable, because you can't even see if they're used to playing if they even play those heroes or not, let alone if they're throwing on those heroes.
Private profiles is also a disaster. Was also a disaster.
Big
That's
disaster,
a giant disaster. But the only reason it exists is because they still refuse to put any sort of role system or a way to incentivize people to actually do something like you can't. If you could play other roles if you're in a stack, you could play other roles if you role queue as it. But since there is a system where everyone just gets thrown into a giant pot and cranked out into a matchmaking into a game where there's no order or rhyme or reason to the how the hours of what their playtime is, and you get flamed for flexing for like a soft throw because it's not your role. Well, like obviously they're gonna private their profile so they can practice other stuff. So just give them the mechanics, give them the rules, the system in place to where they can stack or use role queue so they can play those other roles instead of now where we're still in a system where it's the Wild West. There's no you don't like how do you punish anyone? How do you define what is soft throwing? Like so you have to just do something. You have to put a rule in place. You have to put a system in place that you can then base all of your judgments off of from there.
I think I can agree with incentivizing stacking, but I think in terms of role queuing, because obviously the example you've given a lot is soft throwing, but other things like abusive chat, that's the one that I report most for. There have been people that have said some horrific things to me that are not repeatable on television, but again, it's that thing of like, and I was speaking to Uber about it the other day, and he was saying he's seen the report logs. It is so unfathomably long that people are just the staff are not able to get through all of it effectively and efficiently, because obviously they do still have to investigate to a degree every single one of these reports. So until the reporting system is at a level where you report somebody and you get feedback and it doesn't take 6 to 12 months, until the reporting system is at that level, I don't see the role queue really working out. I liked what you were saying earlier about a 1-1-1 possibly, but I think trying to force a 2-2-2, especially because so now I've got guys on my team, 2 tanks, 2 supports, 2 DPS players, but I really feel like if we had 3 tanks or 3 DPS or whatever, like we could smash the enemy team. Now we can't because you queued.
Well, it'd be a soft role queue. You can't do a hard
Yeah.
role queue in Overwatch. You have to have a
Imagine
soft.
like 1 tank, 1 support, and then the rest flex or something, or even
Yeah.
1 tank, 2 support, and the rest flex, where you can actually like have people that can play certain roles and not
Yeah.
necessarily others.
Yeah, it's like at least that gets rid of like me having 3 other main tanks on my team in a comp game,
Mhm.
because all those people are going to be queuing as primary for tanks. So if they made a good system that would actually matchmake it properly, it would prevent putting me and people with other main tank primaries together. Like that's
You just
that's
have
And not
to
just getting
idea.
one of a bunch. Oh, I'm sorry, Noukky, go on.
Yeah, you just have to be careful with how you put the roles into place, because at the moment, if you really go for 1 tank, 1 support, 1 DPS minimum, then you can still get like that 1 tank that plays Zarya, for example, or that plays only Diva. So you would have to nuance how heroes are put in certain roles a tiny bit more than like these 3 categories that we have at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah, makes
All that
sense.
is true. But that's why soft role queue would be probably the best option. Is like it's not just making sure you don't get 4 of the same role, but you have at least 1 of a role you do need. Like not only do you get games where you have like the 4 main tanks, but then the other 2 players are DPS. So now you have no support players and you have like a bunch of main tank players. So it's like the same. It's just but at the end of the day for me, after that conversation with Mr. X, how he told me how the Call of Duty system worked for like I think it was like Blackout 2, I want to say, or one of the blackouts where they incentivize like getting in a group and playing and going to community tournaments and like helping promote their own ecosystem just through the matchmaking ladder. I would actually think, since that is Team Force philosophy of how stacking is supposed to be in Overwatch and how you're supposed to play the game in a stack, I would much rather, instead of working, though obviously a soft role queue is better than like nothing. You should, well, why not have it? But I would obviously rather than put the resources into having a much more promoted LFG system with incentives and reasons to play in, that because it also teaches the game far better for new players. Then you can then easily move from step to step to step if you want to go pro. If then you could go from easily from your matchmaking community tournaments and like online ladder tournaments to then your open division, your contenders, and so on.
I don't know if you touched that, but I was like at the start of the conversation, I wasn't here. But if you want to incentivize stacking a tiny bit more, you definitely need to tweak something about the matchmaking, because at the moment there is like so many people, especially like in the higher level community, that basically look down on stacking just because it
Yes.
can so easily be abused more or less just to gain rank. You know, all those like, oh my god, he 6 stacks because he wants to farm noobs kind of deal.
That's why there's no duo queue and solo queue and group queue. There's only
Yeah.
one dynamic queue.
If
Scott
they-
Mercer, you told me that was fine too. Look me in the eyes. Dynamic queue's not fine. It's not. It's not fine,
No.
Scott. It's not.
I mean, there
that's
can
what
be a
we have.
team queue and a solo queue for
There
those
could be
players that don't
LFGs.
want to stack.
They could actually have the stack
Yeah.
queue like you're talking about, but they just want to do a dynamic queue. They're not. It's nebulous. There is no stands being made. They must make a stand at some point.
I think the thing I love the most about your stack queue and being incentivized is, so when I get into conversations with people, especially people that are not pros, so I'm talking people from like silver to masters, low GM, and a lot of their arguments, I'll give an argument and they'll say, no, but you're focusing too much on the pros and team play, and it doesn't work like that in comp. And they're absolutely right. It doesn't. The communication isn't there, the synergy, the teamwork, it's non-existent. But if you're incentivizing people to play in a solid 6 stack, it might give people a better idea of how things work, because they'll talk about quality of life changes to a hero, and they'll say, so for example, for me, playing in plat, Moira is broken. The length of her right click is dumb. She can kill Pharahs out of the sky. I hate it. But in the higher levels, Moira doesn't even get played that much. On the pro scene, you'll see her once every 12 games, maybe. So when you're looking at these kind of tweaks, everybody's looking at it from a pro perspective and not on a competitive perspective. And if we could find a way to balance that out, to help people in the comp scene understand what's going on a pro level, it might help a bit and get people on the same page.
This is the
Thoughts?
problem of having different skill floors for different heroes, so they are stronger in like lower elo and not as strong in higher elo. Pharah is a very good example for that. If you are a decent Pharah in gold, you will definitely climb a bit faster than if you are at the same level in higher elo, because they know how to play against you better. And so it's like a very nuanced thing how to actually balance that correctly, because there's just such a big gap between how things are used, so you don't make them OP in pro play and don't make them too overpowered or like too underpowered even in low elo solo queue play.
Right. Well, I think now is as good a time as any to shuffle on over to our next topic, which I think is going to be a really fun one. Everybody by now should have heard about the hashtag Rework Mercy movement that has been started by Aria Rose, a very prominent Mercy player. And she has given quite a few of her own thoughts, and a lot of people have given some other thoughts. I'm just going to highlight a couple here, and then I'm going to open it up to you guys. So her specifically, she created a video where she said, and let me get through everything before everybody gets excited. Get rid
Too
of
late.
res.
I'm already excited.
We see it on your
Wow.
face very clearly.
So she says, get rid of res on E. Get rid of chain beams and infinite ammo in Valk. Valk should have 3 charges of instant res, but Valk only lasts 8 to 10 seconds. And then E would be an increase of healing for like 10 to 15 seconds cooldown, akin to like Lucio's Amp It Up. So she hits E and then she gets slightly buffed healing for a certain amount of time. And that was just kind of her idea. And there's been a lot. Your Overwatch said bring back mass res. That's how we counter the 3-3 goats composition. Somebody was saying that the healing beam should freeze friendlies in place so that they can't run away while spamming I need healing. Another idea that came up was when Mercy Valks, she should be able to instantly cleanse all nearby teammates, especially in the current meta with CC and stun and all of that. One that I
Cleanse
kind
stun?
of like, yeah, well, you know what I mean. With all of these things, Discord Orb and Ashes Fire, things like that. So when Mercy Valks, then it will be a cleanse, like a team-wide cleanse. The one that I really like has been that res should be a charged ability. So kind of like being on fire, you need to stay alive and heal a certain amount and charge up your res before you can actually use it.
So like an ult?
those were
Yeah.
kind of, but
I
like
guess.
smaller. Kind of, but like smaller and not mass. Oh god, somebody even said that during Valk she should have like a pistol aim lock, like tack visor. So these are just these are just kind of some of the ideas that have been thrown around. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Like the I don't know. Like a lot of them are obviously very like weird arguments. The one about I think it was the Your Overwatch one about reverting Mercy to old Mercy being the counter to
buddy.
goats.
No.
That's an interesting one. Like Mercy Mercy doesn't really do anything in goats at all. Just reverting the res would not, like, it doesn't make her stronger. Like
Just be longer goats.
she was stronger post the changes than she
Mm.
was before. Like old Mercy was weaker. Obviously they changed her and she was massively overtuned, right? But even now I think Mercy's in a better spot than she was in the beginning of the game. The only reason she was playing a lot more at the beginning of the game was obviously there was a lot of Pharah. At the beginning there was a lot more DPS comps that relied around playing slow. Lucio Mercy was pretty prominent. A lot of people, like the game in general was a lot there was a lot less of a high skill gap at the pro scene even. Like people have improved a lot over the last 2 years. So Mercy was better just because she's generally lower skill cap at the higher level. But like the argument, like the Arya Rose arguments are like, I don't know. It like the thing is, if you give her the one that really stuck out to me was like the argument about giving her 3 reses, and it's like even if you nerf her ratios on pretty much everything else, if you give her 3 reses in a team fight, she can still build Valk regardless of how much you nerf her. Unless you literally nerf her into the ground, she can still build Valk every other fight at least, which is always going to end up in I'm going to res 3 people in this one team fight and we just win by default. I mean,
It's
that
just
was
mass res under a different name because you almost never get better than 3-man
Exactly.
res anyways in mass res.
was-
It's just a different mat res. It's the same
was-
thing.
was stage 1 of the Overwatch League, like the start of stage 1, was that during the Mercy before she was
Yeah.
nerfed?
No. That
No.
was before stage 1 Mercy was the really broken Mercy, and then it was
Yeah, that's
changed
what I
after
thought.
that.
So
Not
you probably know
better.
better than anyone, like how awful it was, like to play
Yes.
against. Like
Yes.
it was literally any fight that someone would use Valk, they just res 3 people and you can't win the fight. You'd lost unless you saved your Valk for their Valk, and then you would like just res everyone that died. And it's just like it just takes skill out of the game, you know. Like getting a kill means nothing suddenly. 1 res is okay because that's what gives Mercy her whole kit, you know. Like you can res someone that gets picked, but when someone on the enemy team kills 2 or 3 people, resing all of them, it's like, well, it takes away even more diversity, you know. Like it just kind of forces you to play another hero.
What I'm not familiar with Arya Rose's work, but reiterate to me what were the points for Arya Rose? So we had the 3-man res, which is just essentially mass res again.
Right.
You had the no chain healing, and what else?
No infinite ammo because
No
she
infinite
says
ammo in
that-
Valk.
she says that Mercy is primarily like a solo.
So just no
targeted
infinite
healer.
clip is what they mean.
Yeah.
No infinite
Yeah,
clip. Okay, so essentially an irrelevant change anyways, so go on.
Get rid of res on E. So we swap what her E ability is. Instead of being a res,
Well, how
it
does she res now then?
in
Like a
Valk
left
with her
click
3
or a
insta
right click?
reses.
Oh,
No,
and
her-
so
yeah.
it is a mass res. So it wasn't even like 3 individual reses. It is a mass res.
No.
No. It's 3 charges of instant res.
Like earlier when you were
But she
into
doesn't
Valk
res
and
on
your
E.
Rust got reset.
So she
But
wants
you don't
it
press
like
E to res anymore, though, right?
you pop
You do.
Valk, and then for 8 to 10 seconds
And you
would
get
be able
another
to res
ability.
3 people.
Oh,
through
okay.
that.
So does the
Yeah,
E
yeah, yeah.
ability? Is it different when you're not in Valk then?
No. The
Yeah.
E
Is that
ability
how-
is no. The E ability is no longer a res, whether you're in Valk or not. It's not a
Okay.
res. What E does is it's kind of like Lucio's amp it up, so it increases your healing on your beam for like 10 with a 10 to 15 second cooldown.
Yes, but what do you press for res now? E was res before.
I mean,
I see.
Probably
So
like Symmetra your
Val.
ultimate again or something.
yeah, I
Oh,
guess
you press
I guess
Q
I
again
Okay,
to
okay, I
read
see.
3
Q and then
times.
press Q.
I
This seems like
guess.
this is a control. See right there, where they're not even thinking of the controller scheme here. Like, how do you even use this? How do you even use this when you don't use
Yeah.
E to res? How do you make that work? How do you make it work? I'm like, are you gonna be right clicking now? Because are you still allowed to damage boost? Are you still allowed to damage
You
boost
just
while
like
doing
you
Valve?
just stand on top of where they died and you auto
What
rest them.
are you space barring? Like which what are you using to res now? Explain this. This is where it breaks down. What do you use to res in your new mouse res? I don't get it. So okay, so then you have that, and is that the end of the changes after the E change? Is that the end of the change? Does it touch on
Yeah.
anything else?
No, it's
Okay,
just
so
those-
I'm gonna go through each of these points. A, you get mass res again. You get the mass res, which you can't use because you can't use the right. There are not enough buttons on the keyboard, anyways. So, but you have a mass res again. That was better than before. So epic, great. You brought back mass res, but a different name. You can no longer get chain healing. Interesting nerf idea, but it's irrelevant anyways because you've now. The problem with Mercy is like, so you have chain heals, which is cool, right? That makes Mercy more. She has more utility, but the problem with Mercy has never been her healing. No, it was really annoying in Dive because she could pocket Zen more effectively, so Winston's could not kill like Zen at all because of the Mercy pocket. But it was res. That is the thing about Mercy. It's the same problem about Diva. You have a central component of a kit that is inherently strong. Like the character, if it does not have that component, it is not good. It doesn't, because Mercy doesn't. It's not like I've seen this conversation as well on Twitter. I think maybe Cruz is the one that brought it up. I can't remember, but like, unlike Lucio, unlike Zen, unlike Ana, all of those characters have a DM-based ability where like you can frag. You can still frag someone if you need to. You have mechanical outplay. Mercy is a pure support character. There is no. You are not pulling out the pistol and fragging anyone. You're not. You do have cool movement abilities, like you are able to move well, but you can't frag. You can't boop. You don't have orbs. It's all damage boost and heals, and which is inherently less worthwhile than any other support character, because the only other value she brings is the ability to pocket a Zen. But if her Valk is just a heal, like she's just healing, then it's not very good. Because why would you use Valk unless you're playing a very mobile combo? You could just play Lucio, or you could get something else that gives you a beat and you have more utility from Lucio. The only thing that Mercy brings to the table is res. Res is what and damage boost. Damage boost as well, especially in sniper metas. But if you don't have res, or if res is now overtuned, all that matters about her is res. So eventually, you have to come to the conclusion that you either must get rid of res, or you must change res to where it is balanced. And it is almost impossible to make res balanced in a way where she'd be useful all the time, which is why she is currently balanced, which is what Cruz said on Twitter. She is currently balanced. She is fine as she is. It is just not good in this meta.
Yeah,
and you're gonna have to.
Exactly how I think
that's
as
it.
well.
That's it. She's just not good in this meta, but she's fine still. She's in a fine spot. They've balanced res to where it's not incredibly overpowering. They balanced the rest of her kit where she's still relatively interesting. The only thing I will admit is that maybe she could have a more engaging kit, but even still, like watching a really good Mercy player play Mercy, you can tell the differences, especially when it comes to movement in particular. Like Mercy probably has actually one of the most in-depth movement mechanics in terms of how you can use it and abuse it, in terms of like all this different jumps and ways to stop your movement that a lot of characters in Overwatch don't have.
Yeah.
So even then, I find the more compelling Mercy kit a kind of weak argument, because what they really mean is I want to be able to shoot more people. That's pretty much what they mean by Mercy, is I want to be able to shoot more, because Mercy's kit is already pretty involved, especially at like a high level. Mercy's kit is very involved in terms of how your movement works. So overall, 0 out of 10 for that argument. 0 out of 10. Go again, Aria. Get it out of here. And I don't think you understand how keyboards work. There's not that many keys.
There's
Are
actually
there
more
many
keys
keys,
than
though?
just 2 of us. There's just not enough key bindings. But I think I agree with all of his points. I think Mercy is pretty balanced right now. I don't think that she needs a rework. She's in a spot where she's maybe not like the hero that you should play all the time like she was before, but she's definitely in a spot where you can play her. I think even in competitive, you can play her not only situationally. Like there's still people that play Mercy and that climb. There's still people that that can one trick her. to a decent level at least. And I think tuning anything for her is just gonna swing one way or the other again. It's just like either she gets OP again or she gets bad again if you change her kit. I find one of the ideas that you brought up pretty interesting, which is the cleanse, since the overall hero kit of Overwatch gets a tiny bit more in the direction of more CC. That's maybe something you could look at in the long run, not immediately, definitely, but definitely in the long run, if there's like maybe more heroes that come that have CC abilities or like damage over time abilities like Ashe has. But in general, I think there is just I probably make many enemies with this now, but I think Mercy is in one of those spots where there's such a passionate community about it or like around it that it's just sometimes those demands is just out of principle more than out of actual like thought about the balance of the game itself. It's more like, oh, we are so passionate about this hero and she's not 100% in the meta now, so she's like, she doesn't get enough love. And I think that's just maybe the wrong word, and sorry, I'm not natively English speaking, but I think that's just delusional. I don't know how to better say it. I'm sorry. I think sometimes you have to go off your point of I love this hero and actually see the overall picture a tiny bit more than just I want to have this hero more in the meta or more in the game.
Yeah.
And it's actually
one of the sorry, Fusions, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing.
Oh. One of the things that I read was somebody saying, and they were arguing for a rework, and the first line in the argument was Mercy used to be able to change the tide of the game with the press of a button, and it's like, should any hero actually be able to do that with something?
The better question is, does she? The better question is, does she? Because yeah, no, I wanna make a point on that, because if you have Mercy on both sides, how does it change the tide of the game? It's basically just a reset of the game more than a change of pace.
That makes sense.
Especially in sniper meta.
Yeah, obviously it changes the tide of like a fight, but like, yeah, I don't know. I don't really think a hero like having a hero that can just press a button that's not even an aimed thing, you know, like obviously that's not something you should be able to do. Like even like I'd say like the comparison you could make is like, I mean, a widow can shoot one person in the head and kill them straight away, but obviously that takes a lot of skill, you know, like just pressing a button, rezzing 4 people. It's like, is that really something that should be able to happen? And if it did, like, would both teams just abuse it, like Noukky said, you know?
I was Mercy main back then in season 1. I was the master of hide and seek. You can ask Fisher. He looked for me every time. But it was just like, you fly in, you res, then the other team dies, and then she flies in, she reses, and then you're at the same point again. There was just no point in like, oh, maybe you just rest 4 people out of accident and then you lose the fight afterwards. But if we look at mass res as it is, like as the meta is right now, it was literally just be a reset of the entire fight, because in Goat's comp or like in those tank heavy comps that probably gonna roll around again, you just pile up anyways. Like there's not even a chance that somebody dies out of range or something, because you're just in the ball anyways.
It would just be goats v goats, but you replace Lucio with Mercy, because now you have the ability to reset a fight. Like they use a combo, because Mercy. The thing people don't understand is that when Mercy's really good, when she's balanced enough to where her res is strong, or where her res is particularly strong in a meta to where it overrules some of the negatives she might have where you don't have Lucio. Like she does Lucio's job better than Lucio. She heals more. She peels better, because you don't have a boop, but you have direct healing for that's more that you don't have to use an amp for. It's just always on cooldown. That's why she was so good with Xin as opposed to Lucio, because Lucio you have to speed someone to keep them alive because you really don't have the healing. While Mercy, you can just heal them directly, and bubbles and barriers do not block that healing, while Lucio's healing does. So I don't think people a lot understand that like when Mercy is good enough, you don't see Lucio. When Mercy is strong, you will not see Lucio unless it's like a back in the old days, which you don't really see anymore. You played the Fair Mercy comps where you ran like Lucio Mercy to be like extremely mobile, but it wasn't But when you're playing static comps, like just having a Mercy that does more healing and now can res you in a fight, which is better than a beat, because the problem with beat, it's still one of the worst ults because it has that garbage cast time for no reason. I don't know why they still haven't changed how it's not instantaneous, because like you can just get stuck on something, land on someone's head, you get interrupted, and so that's why beat is bad, because instantaneous is always better than cast. That's why armor pack is the best heal in the game aside from trance, because it's instantaneous and it's 150 HP just instantly. And if it's any, and then also top of that, if it overheals, you get armor. So instantaneous is better, and Mercy is instantaneous healing. Like you are just healing continuously without an aura at a very, and it can't get interrupted. And that is why it's tough to bounce Mercy. And when people say like, well, I wish her kit was more engaging, I wish she wasn't just about damage boosting, but the problem is like, you have to completely rework Mercy. It's not even about, and then you don't even have, you can't even really put res in the kit anymore. It's not the same hero. She is designed around res. She is designed around res. That is her, that is the fulcrum of her. She must use res. And the only way to make her, to completely rework her to where she's more engaging and it's less about damage boosting and doing things like that, is you have to then look at, should res even be in the kit anymore? Should res even be there? Because if you make her more impactful, if you make her where she can do more, be more engaging, do more damage, you know, some sort of things like that. Even a cleanse, even though I don't necessarily think cleanse is great, because the only thing that cleanse I think is like super strong for is anti-nades, like getting rid of anti-heals. But Ana is a worthless hero as well because D.Va exists. So there's like no reason to like run it. So that is the problem with Mercy, and the problem with a lot of heroes is like they are balanced around a single aspect of their kit. And if you want to rework the hero, you have to completely fundamentally change that particular ability.
And the big question with that is, will people still like her if you actually like rework her so much, because they're used to this hero that they have around since 2 years now and that they fell in love with? And how do you rework her so it's still like it's more engaging, but you actually change her so much and change and try to fit her into her lore again, which so many people are very fond of. I think it's very ambitious for people that love the hero so much to try to get into the conversation about how they want her to be more engaging and how they want to rework her. It's just basically the problem of the overall picture they need to have in mind, and of the consequences that can actually come with that. Like, will my hero still be the same? Will my hero still be the hero that I love if those stuff goes through?
Well, that's I think that pretty much covers Mercy. You guys have pretty much echoed what a lot of the bigger Mercy players have been saying. You know, Daya and Judro and Craig, not Craggy. Who was it?
Cruz.
Craggy's a big Mercy player. Craggy's a really big Mercy player.
Can confirm.
Classic Dane.
Yeah, so just she's more skillful now in terms of just her using her kit effectively, using her guardian angel effectively. There's a lot more skill involved. She's situational, as she should be. That's pretty much where Mercy is. The thing that I really want to talk about now as we move to the next topic is D.Va. D.Va is somebody that hasn't been spoken about a lot until very, very recently. Like, everybody's just kind of left D.Va alone, and now suddenly there's quite a lot of discussion around her matrix, and not just her matrix, but the fact that she deals so much damage with her missiles. She's almost as much of a hybrid as Brigitte, just minus healing. She's a damage tank hybrid. And I just wanted to know, what are your guys' thoughts on matrix in general?
You're welcome, by the way, community. By having that video that started the discussion on Matrix again, you're welcome, community. I worked really hard on that, learning editing at a very basic level. But
good job.
I think, I mean, honestly, it's like it's an old convo. Really, it's like it's just Mercy in tank form, because which sounds weird. It sounds like weird, like why I would say that, but it's because her entire kit is based around Matrix. And without Matrix, D.Va's not good. And if it's 200 nerfed, or if it's too overpowered, then she's broken. Yeah. So, I mean, like, lest we forget, back when D.Va was an actual menace, where she had 400 armor and, like, incredibly long Matrix. She was disgusting. She was disgustingly strong. There was no stopping her. She was the best hero. And And then they nerfed the armor, nerfed the matrix, and so she's in a lot more balanced spot than she was before. And they made her more engaging by adding like you can shift while flying and doing damage and micro missiles. But in return, that's helped make up for some of the weaknesses of her armor and matrix, because now she can just one clip people when she has when she can find them. So that's the problem with D.Va, is like she has matrix, and how do you balance matrix to the point where D.Va is balanced, where you don't have to play her? Because she, even without matrix, she's strong with mobility and damage, and her ult is pretty strong for combos and even making space. But matrix is like the key. Again, like how do you balance matrix? How do you balance an ability that can be used both offensively and defensively? You can eat ults, which no one else can do. No one else can literally remove an ult from the game. You can't shoot a grav and, well, I mean, Genji can deflect, I guess. Genji can deflect things, but like, but that's entirely different. But she can eat Hanzo, she can eat D.Va, she can eat the dynamite, she can eat. Then you can use her offensively to just, you can sit in front of a target and make sure they can't get healed from Ana. Like you can remove a healer from the game. Like when without Ana you can just win an engagement. So that's where the problem again with D.Va is like, how do you balance matrix? The rest of her kit I think is relatively balanced. Though I always think being mobile is way better than not mobile, because mobility is still stronger. It's always better to have mobility than no mobility, and which is a problem. But with like map design, I think more than anything, or maybe just putting more, everyone having more mobility like options. But it's matrix. It's like, how do you balance matrix where it's not it's not overpowered, and everyone's like, well, D.Va's fine now because she's really engaging. But like, have you looked at the meta report? Like, no one has not picked D.Va for like a year. Like, it's always D.Va.
96
Always
over a
D.Va.
year.
or something, yeah. I mean, like when D.Va originally got nerfed, her armor and her matrix, because she was way overtuned. She got originally nerfed, like I can't even remember how long ago now. People stopped
Probably
playing her
mid-2017.
for like a little bit and testing out a lot of like different stuff. People played Ryan Zaya a lot, like, and then I think it was probably like in the Korean scene there was just a lot of people still playing Winston D.Va. And I think this is around the time dive became like really prominent in every region. But like you could see like just giving her the rockets and giving her the damage, like Avast said, like it just makes her able to do like another thing, while her matrix is still relevant because I mean she can like eat ults and stuff. Like no one else can do that. Um, the thing with D.Va is like because the matrix is so hard to balance. Like I think like the easiest thing to say, like the you could do is like nerf some of her damage aspects to make her a little bit less well-rounded. So like for example, a small damage nerf on like rockets, since right now she can a good D.Va at a high level can fly into any support, a Lucio or a Zenyatta, and one shot them both. Like if it's a good D.Va player. So basically she could just 1v1 people while doing a lot of other stuff as well. Like, and she has insane mobility. But again, like you can't really take away D.Va's mobility. Like it's kind of hard to nerf it as well, and like the matrix, if you reduce it any more than it already is, you're gonna make her kind of bad, right? Because if you reduce matrix like from like for example half what it is right now, it just kills off the hero pretty much, because she's not gonna be able to do like anything with it. And again, this is just talking about like number nerfs. Like I don't even know what you could change about her kit to actually make her work better with the matrix. It's hard. Like
Then
what
you
you could
walk that
actually
fine
change.
line as well. If you nerf matrix,
Mhm.
or not nerf matrix, if you nerf damage, I guarantee you everyone's still gonna play D.Va, but now all the D.Va players are gonna be complaining because they're just a matrix bot. It's
Yeah,
like that is the key. It's like, how do you nerf a hero whose kit is built around an ability, even if you reduce their damage? Well, fine. Now you're just gonna do less damage, but you're still gonna do the same thing. It's like, you just made the hero less engaging. And it's the same problem with like Mercy. Everyone's like, we want Mercy to be more engaging. Well, guess what? If we make her strong, if we buff her other parts of her kit, or focus more of her other parts of her kit, but keep her res the same, she's broken. But if you reduce the other parts of her kit to where now she's less engaging, just like D.Va, then all you have is a boring hero that you still must play. So it's the problem of when you build a hero around a single aspect of a kit.
Yeah, that's true, because it kind of suggests that in of itself, like even if you nerf D.Va's damage, like she's still she is overtuned, but like if you nerf her and she's still gonna be useful, she'll just be like more frustrating to play, you know? Like it doesn't really get rid of the problem because she's still gonna be good. So the only way you can actually make D.Va have a lower pick rate is to adjust something about the matrix, or change matrix entirely, and it's really hard to do that.
Well, one of the ideas that I kind of thought of, and I know that a lot of others had the same idea, so I'm not going to take credit for it, but it's an idea. And I'm going to bring up an example, and Sandy is going to shout at me again because she pointed it out. But there is a video of Space and an Eaton Grav, and Matrix was at like 0.1 charge or something stupid, and Grav got eaten. And the argument was that it's so dumb because there's no
Good argument.
the idea that I thought of is if you had Grab as like, so there were two ideas. The one is not mine, and the one is that Matrix is also charged, so you do damage or you defend from damage, or like you tank damage basically, and then your Matrix will build up and then you can use it. The idea that I had was that your Matrix is kind of like a shield where it has charge, and you would need X amount to eat certain things. So, for an example, obviously I don't know good numbers, but for an example, you need you have 100 charge, you need 25 charge to eat a pulse bomb, you need 50 charge to eat a grab, something like that, something that would make it a little bit more skillful than just tap right click. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that eating a grab is forehead. It's really not. But I think the fact that you can do it with so little matrix left is a little bit silly. I don't know how you guys think about that.
I actually like the idea of having a certain amount of damage or having a certain amount of X that you can eat. I think that would make it a tiny bit more nuanced than just having 6 seconds of, or like 2 seconds of I'm eating everything.
Mhm.
But you'd have to tweak it a tiny bit more than just adding that onto it. I think the time would have to be tweaked a tiny bit more on how long she can hold it, and especially like how do you actually put each and every different ultimate into it, because like a McCree Deadeye does way more damage than, for example, a Graviton does, although a Graviton may have a tiny bit more impact at that point.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like maybe like on this is not really something I've given much thought to, but like just thinking about it, maybe there was like a buffer on Matrix, just for the sake of conversation. Like if for example, she has her 2-second matrix, right? So say if you hadn't got it charged above a certain level, you couldn't just throw out the there is actually a really really small buffer on it now, like where if she has used up all of her matrix, she can't use that tiny little bit that is just recharged for half a second at the bottom. Like she has to wait like a second or two before she can put it back up again, even a little bit. But like maybe if they made that buffer a bit extended so that the bar had to build up like a quarter before she could throw out her matrix, but it still blocked the same amount, then maybe it would stop. Because the thing is, right, it takes a lot of skill to eat ults like that. But then it kind of leaves it up to the diva player, right? Because if you have to use your matrix to stop the damage incoming before that, or if you have to save some for eating an ultimate, it kind of makes the matrix a little bit weaker while leaving it up to the diva player. So it doesn't really reduce the skill involved, but it does make her a little it tunes her a little bit so that she's not able to just on the fly eat a grav like that on like such low percentage of matrix, like you said.
That's probably the best way I've heard yet to make it more engaging, at least, and make it less just I hold right click and I'll eat anything that comes my way. Because if you actually need to time it, it's the same way where like people could argue that like, well, Zarya Bubble is a really powerful ability, but you have to time it properly. And like you can save people from ults, and so but you have to hit it. Like if someone gets pulsed, you Zarya Bubble, you save them. And I think if you have something where it's a lot more like it's like a not actually a QTE event, but it's like something where you're very much engaged in using that ability, then it definitely, and you have a threshold for when that ability can actually be used, rather than it's just used all the time and you can use it whenever when you have it up and it eats whatever. Then that's probably the strongest way to balance it yet. I saw some suggestions in chat where people were like, hey, you should buff Baby Diva and nerf Matrix. And I'm like, which is actually an interesting concept. I'm not actually even laughing at that. It's an interesting concept. Because it takes the focus now from her being in mech form to where it's just like a 2-stage hero almost. Because Baby Diva is essentially like you're in Baby Diva. Now if you change it to where it's actually almost two different heroes in functionality, and you're still equally valid in both, it does make her a different pick. It does make her more interesting, but the problem is like at the end of the day, like Matrix you always prefer to be Mech Diva because Matrix is just the best.
Yeah.
So you still have to nerf Matrix rather than worry about Baby Diva. You still have to worry about Matrix first. Like Matrix is still the key of like you have to change this to change the hero.
All right. I think that pretty much brings us to the end of our set topics. I know we are a little bit over time, so I'm going to take like a maximum of 10 minutes to do Q&A. So a couple of questions have been forwarded to me. I got a couple of questions before the show, so I'm just going to skim through some of the better ones, and we'll see how far we manage to get in our 10 minutes. So general question, and this is particularly for Avast and Fusions. How different is the contender scene from Overwatch League? And how is the pressure? I know Fusions, you haven't yet actually played in Overwatch League, but of course there is that looming pressure. Like, how has that been since you got announced? And for Avast, you've played in Overwatch League, you're casting contenders. What is the difference?
Fusions, I'll let you do your perspective first, then I'll do mine after.
Like in terms of pressure, it's definitely something that I've noticed. Not even just because I've got signed for Boston, obviously, but just because of the World Cup, because of that bigger stage. Because I guess that's a kind of similar size stage to the Overwatch League, at least in terms of like viewership. But like yeah, you notice it a lot more. It's like people when you're playing in just contenders, especially like in regions other than NA, it's like people will still kind of watch, but there's a lot less viewership, so people don't expect as much as you. It's like even if players have a bad performance, they don't really care as much. Whereas when you're an Overwatch League player, or after you have a World Cup performance, like for me at least, I've noticed a lot more people are really quick to comment on either good plays that I make, or like if they think I make a misplay or they see a misplay that I do, like people are really quick to pick up on it. So I guess in terms of pressure, there's definitely a lot. There's definitely a lot more. Like, but I think it's just one of the things that you've got to deal with. Like, of course, when there's more people watching you, you're gonna have more people like. You got more people cheering for you. You've also got more people who want to bring you down. So it's just one of the pressures of being in the like kind of at the top of the scene that you've just got to deal with, I think.
I can agree with that just about all points. It's just a hazard of the job, you know. It's the same way where, I mean, pretty much just like in contenders as well. There's just so much less pressure. Just like less pressure. There's not as many people watching. There's not as much production value putting it to not just analyze your good plays, but analyze your bad. Like seeing like this guy fed. This guy just hard fed right here. Like, hey, let's all bring it up on the jumbotron and like let's watch whoever it is like have a really bad play. There's less, not just in numbers, but it's like there's just a lot less polish in terms of like how a storyline or a matchup is presented as well from like a broadcast/talent perspective as well. So there's a lot more pressure to perform. I think moving into this next season, it will be a lot better on a player side because there's less games. And last season, it was really grueling for a lot of teams. They had problems because you were playing 2 games a week every week, and you had generally, if you wanted to have just even a single day of break, you pretty much only had a 3-day turnaround between games, and it was really tough for people to keep up. And to be, especially when each week all the matches matter, right? But you're almost always going to have a stronger match and a weaker match. And especially if you're in a week where it's like maybe 2 relatively even opponents, like who do you always have to make a decision in a lot of cases, like who do you prepare more for? And Jake has mentioned this like in other things, but like there was a point where everyone was preparing more for Shanghai than their tougher matches because they were afraid to be the first team to lose to Shanghai. Like even though they had tough opponents, like it's like, well, we can't lose to Shanghai, so now we have to spend our 3 days of prep time prepping for Shanghai, because if we lose, it's disaster. It's like career ending. And that is like so now only having one day a week where you play a game is a lot better for a lot of people. And also they've talked about like changing up how they're going to do like breaks where maybe there's like some more off time and things like that. Not more off time, I guess, because this off season's been really long, but a better spacing of off time where it's not as bad for both the viewers and the players. So I think it's mainly just a pressure thing. And before it was definitely a burnout perspective as well, because everyone was just thrown into it. Now I think next season will be a lot better, especially for teams that existed for the original 12 teams, because everyone sort of, they have a very much understanding of the structure and the environment and the pressure, so they're going to be a little bit more prepared moving into the next season than they were last. Because you have to realize, it's like, no one really understands this, but like Overwatch League is for the majority of teams is taking a 20 to now up to like 60 or whatever $1 million organization and building it in like 3 months to now have a league spot. Like, you are investing an incredible amount of money to now build an organization, unless you're a pre-existing company, which a lot of them aren't necessarily. I think Boston has a unique advantage in that respect, actually. Like, you will learn this, Fusions, if you haven't already, but like, you have an employee portal on Boston, because Craft Group is like a real company. You have an employee portal. You can log in and be like, here are my investments. Here are my like deductions for my HSA. Here's my like a regular job where you can see your tax breakdown and see where your money is going, and you can log in and you have an HR department. But like, a lot of these orgs are like, we paid $40 million for a spot, and now we have to make an entire organization in the next 3 months. So we have to hire everybody. We have to get our team. We have to prepare our social media. We have to find accommodations. We have to like build a brand, and then on top of that, how do you perform like the regular, I guess, the responsibilities of an employer? Like, when Overwatch League requires healthcare, because we have non-EU healthcare policies, and so it's like, how do you do healthcare? How do you do housing? How do you make sure everyone's getting their money on time, and like seeing how it's broken down? Like, that's an incredible amount of logistics that has to be built in a very short time frame, and it requires a lot of staff. And that's why I think, and at least from a pure organizational standpoint, a lot of the existing teams have an advantage, because they've done the terrible hard work for the first season, and now they don't have to worry about it nearly as much come into the second season, while a lot of these other organizations have to launch from the ground up again and have a mad scramble, especially for organizations like some of the Chinese teams, where they're going to have, well, I guess only the one with Kib and Nero, right? Isn't Kib and Nero the one? Isn't that Chengdu? Yeah.
No, that's
Guangzhou.
Or is that Guangzhou? Oh, it's Guangzhou. Yeah. So they have Chinese, Korean, and Western visas they have to worry about.
Yeah.
Yes.
So while also building an organization from scratch. So best of luck, because I heard for a lot of Overwatch League teams, they haven't even started the visa process for some of their players. So
Oh, that's bad.
I know.
They're gonna
I
pull
know
a fusion.
Guangzhou definitely has, because they're in China now, right? And I know Kip was talking about getting his visa done soon. So
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, this next question is mainly how do you deal with moving from a semi-pro player to a member of staff? Because obviously a lot of things change. You get so used to your role as an actual player. Like, how does the mind shift? How does that happen? Not happen, but how do you deal with that?
I think one of the biggest problems if you move from a player perspective to a staff perspective is that you actually have less impact in the outcome of official matches than you had before. Like, you have to kind of accept that this is how I prepped my team. This is the best I could do in that situation. I'm just sitting here and listening them yell at each other and at the enemy team at the same time. That's like, you just have to accept that kind of fact. But other than that, it's actually like, I think former players or people that played competitively before are actually like those staff members that are best for teams, like the transitioning from a player to a manager to a coach, because they know the other side of it. Like, they know what they needed as a player, or that what they wanted as a player, and how to help them achieve that maybe a tiny bit better. It's not about, like, especially for coaching, it's sometimes not about the coaching aspects of how to talk to people, how to like interact, how to communicate. It's for them, it's more about, as I was a player, for me it's very prominent, because I was in talks with organizations when I was a player, and it's more like, I know how they treated me at that time, and I don't want to treat my players like that. Like, I have my very, very set principles about how I want to communicate with them, how I want to keep them in the loop about things, and how I want to treat them as a person, which I basically hold above anything because I know how shit it can be.
Nice. I like that. That's actually like one of the best motivations I've ever heard. That's beautiful. Okay, we've got two like quick meme questions, and then I'll maybe take one more serious question because JBN is shouting at me for ignoring him. But let me quickly do the meme questions. So, first one's for fusions. And this comes from a South African guy who's probably going to watch the VOD later. Why did you pick the name Fusions? And will you be looking at changing it because, Philadelphia?
No, I'm not changing it. I think it's funny, but I think honestly, it would make me never want to change it more. But I got the name because I literally it's a really short story. I was on like Xbox playing Call of Duty when I was like 11 years old, and I saw a guy on the enemy team in my deathmatch game with the name with Fusions in it. Thought it looked cool, copied it, stuck ever since. That's how I have it.
That's terrible.
Why?
Oh
How
my
else?
God.
You'd be surprised how many people get aliases just from copying other people. I mean, it's like it's only words at the end of the day.
Suppose. Man, I was hoping for something more exciting. All right. The next one's for Avast, our social media guy. He thinks you're like the coolest thing since sliced bread. I swear. He's been on my case for weeks to get you on the podcast.
That is an
And
old saying. Sliced bread. That's like a 19th century thing. But go on.
Yeah, my parents are old. Okay, I learned my things from them. Um, and he said that you are known as like the memester of Overwatch. So his question, I kid you not, is how big is your meme folder?
Look it
I mean,
up right now.
I don't have an exact. Well, the thing is, I can't just look it up because I have 3 separate folders. It's like
Oh
I
my
have
God.
I have my home PC, my phone, and well, actually, I guess now I only have 2 because I had a folder as well at the facility PCs for Boston. Because everyone that you could choose to rent a space to practice in the facility last season, that will not be available this season, by the way. But so I used to have 3, but now I have 2, and I don't know the exact number, like how much there is. But you gotta be dedicated to when you have like 30 minutes to spare, just looking for funny images to use in your spare time, and that's how you get that big follow from the Overwatch League. Only player/ex-player to be followed by the Overwatch League. So get owned. Dante always pesters me about it. It's like, I want to get followed. It's like, well, be funny, Dante, which is impossible. So get owned.
Nice.
Just get owned.
All right. One last, I say quick question. I don't know how quick this is going to be, but JVN is shouting at me. And this is for everybody. What are your thoughts on the delete Brig movement?
I mean,
I'm
it's
not a big
kind.
fan of deleting anything.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really realistically, Blizzard is never gonna delete a hero from the game, right? Like,
Mhm.
and they can rework maybe, but they're not gonna rework a hero that came out this year. I I don't I don't think there's much of a point in saying delete Brig, but giving suggestions as to why she can actually like for example, at least prior to the nerfs, I'm not sure how it's gonna weigh up really, but like prior to the nerf, she was definitely overtuned. Like I think she should have been like nerfed way quicker for sure. The fact that we went through 2 whole contender seasons, like I guess there was no Overwatch League, right? And that's probably why we haven't seen immediate nerfs. Because if there was, there probably would have been quicker nerfs. But yeah, I don't think you can really, yeah, delete Brig is kind of it's like a I don't want to say like stupid thing to say, but like I don't really know how else to phrase it, but like it's obviously not gonna happen. Like they're not gonna
Yeah.
just delete the hero.
I'm personally a big fan of effective communication and constructive communication, and just
Mhm.
having like a hashtag that shows them, oh, we don't like that hero, doesn't help very much. I think like writing articles about it, like if you want to write an essay or something that they can actually use to have feedback from, is definitely way better than just having this, oh, I hate her, please delete kind of thing.
Yeah.
I can agree with all those. I mean, I was a really big offender back when I was first starting to play like professionally, of like back when Barehand still worked with Blizzard. I would
Mhm.
be in Pro Talk. Yeah, Noukky knows. I would be a really
I
big
banned you from the feedback channel so
I'd be
often.
really big offender of yelling at Blizz, especially bare hands in particular. But sometimes you get a little heated because the game just isn't very fun at that particular moment. But I would feedback's important, and delete Brig is like dumb because it's you legitimately a lot of people don't understand because of how broken and overtuned Brig was, and it is annoying. But like there was no counters to dive. There was no counters to mobility is such a strong, especially versus like tanks and static compositions. Like there was no counter. You were forced to play dive. A lot of people were like, fine. It's like, well, it's like the diva discussion all over again. It's like, well, I'm fine with it being overpowered because it's fun to me. But it's like, should something be overpowered? Don't you want to see variety? Isn't the whole point why people are complaining about Brig now is that there is no variety? There was no variety before. Like maybe some slice swaps, but it was the same thing. It was dive, and so Brig does fill a role that is very important, which is something to keep your backline alive and to mitigate the power of dive. But the problem is that she is so powerful that she also gave so much strength to tank compositions to where you can sustain and just roll frontline comps as well. And that is where the problem is. You need to have variety, but not something where it's strong all the time in a very, very powerful way. And that's why Brig should not be deleted. It should just be reworked to where she now with the Brig nerfs, I've been getting a lot of information from like Overwatch League scrims since contenders were stuck on this patch. But like for the live patch, it's much more interesting. There's a lot more experimentation with comps and changing how things work because now you don't have a bash that does a lot of damage and can go through barriers because it even gets interrupted by Winston bubbles now. People don't understand that, but like bash gets interrupted by Winston bubbles now on live. So it changes the dynamic of the hero a lot, and I think Brig is like a necessary evil to counter dive because mobility is so powerful, and since map design in Overwatch is still inherently favored towards mobility, like there is no map that where you can, besides King's Row and like Control Center Lijiang and things like that, where playing Deathball static comps or at least slower comps is more favorable than playing dive. Dive is always a stronger thing, and part of that is because D.Va works very well in dive while you generally want a Zarya with like a Rhine. But like the utility of D.Va and the damage of D.Va and the bomb is like just stronger than Zarya on all fronts because Zarya is great if you can live and not get your grav eaten, but if your backline dies, then Zarya is useless. And one bubble won't save everyone, so you need to have a Brig. And that is why Brig is like necessary evil. She just needs to be brought to a place that she is not as strong because there is no pivotal part of her kit that's you can fix the problems with armor. You can put armor underneath above shields. You can change the health pack cooldown. You can change how much it's healed. You can change bash. But there is nothing about her that's fundamentally broken. Like from a design standpoint, she's just overtuned.
Yeah. Cool. I think that kind of wraps it up. We went way over time, Avast. I'm really sorry. I know you've got a crazy schedule.
I still have like I have still some time to, so I should be fine. So.
Okay, well, at least we didn't run you too late. I want to thank you guys so much for being on the podcast with me today. I really do appreciate it. I think we had a lot of fun, especially laughing at Avast. The whole of Twitch chat was just loving Avast losing his mind. So thank you guys. I really appreciate all of your input. And once again, thank you to all of the viewers that came. I really enjoyed having you guys here. Your questions have been fantastic. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. It does unfortunately happen. Sometimes it do be like that. But if you have ideas for topics, or if you just want to get in touch with us, please follow us on Twitter. I would really appreciate that. I know everybody involved podcast would really appreciate that. And you can keep up to date with when we are going live. Once again, a reminder that this is the last episode for the year, but we will be back in the new year, possibly around the first week. We've still got a lot of stuff to decide, but obviously people are going home for the holidays. So yeah, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Once again, thank you to my guest. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was fun.
nice
Thank
to
you.
be here.